Well, now that the fall season has settled in, that usually means a shift in people's spending. First, it was back to school clothing and supplies, then Thanksgiving, and now we have to start thinking about the big holiday just around the corner. Always an expensive time of year. So we're going to talk a little bit about economics and how things are looking on the economic front for Lethbridge in southern Alberta. And to do that, I'm going to bring in Trevor Lewington, who's the CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge. Welcome back to Bridge City News, Trevor. Great to have you on again.
Thanks so much, Annette. Great to see you. Always a pleasure.
Okay, great. So, Trevor, we're talking economics here, the economy. What is the overall economic trend right now? What's going on?
Well, the economy's been a bit of a mixed bag this year. Alberta overall is forecasted to grow by about 2.7% this year, which is actually pretty healthy,
Yeah.
all things considered. Rising oil prices have certainly boosted the provincial government's coffers, but growth is expected to slow down next year in 2024 to around 2%. And really, it's higher interest rates and continued inflationary pressure on prices that are continuing to be a bit of a drag. And ultimately, inflation is still above the Bank of Canada's target, so we might even see some more interest rate hikes ahead. And that's, of course, a concern for everyone.
Definitely. That's unfortunate news for sure. And that growth does seem to be happening faster than we can keep up with it for sure. So, what about employment? Is unemployment up or down?
Yeah, unemployment locally has been actually very stable for the last 6 months. We've been kind of hovering just over 5%. And that's a pretty consistent number where we've been for the last couple of years after the pandemic. So that's actually good news. We have seen lower unemployment in our region in the past, but that can be very challenging for employers when there's not enough people looking for work. So 5% is a pretty healthy number, means there's enough movement in the economy that there's people looking for work and employers can find some level of staffing, which is good news.
Okay, yeah, that is. I was going to ask you how businesses are faring now with the challenge of finding workers to fill those job vacancies. Are there any particular sectors that are just seeing more labor shortages than others?
Yeah, great question. So, in the Lethbridge Medicine Hat economic region, that's how the government of Alberta sort of looks at this. In that particular region right now, there's just less than 6,000 vacant positions. So, there are 6,000 jobs up for grabs. Employers would fill those today if they could find a qualified person. That's a pretty big number. It's about double from where we were just before the pandemic.
Wow.
So that's a bit of a challenge for employers. It means, potentially they're having to throttle back on production or maybe reschedule a project because they can't get staffed up. And in particular, it's positions like equipment operators, class one drivers, the skilled technical trades are still a bit of a gap right now.
Wow, that's actually really surprising because those are quite popular programs at the college and whatnot. So it looks like those students are picking the right fields.
Yeah, for sure. We've seen enrollments at both of our post-secondaries increase, which is the good news. And typically, if we look at those 6,000 job vacancies, the average hourly wage is north of $22 an hour. So these are definitely not minimum wage positions. People can find the skills and find the training. We've got to figure that out.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic for students looking to go into those fields for sure. What about small businesses? Are we seeing more or less business startups?
The total number of business licenses issued in the city, which is sort of the way we measure that, is about the same as it's been for the last couple of years. We did lose a number of businesses, of course, during the pandemic. We did see business licenses decline. We've since recovered back, but it's been very stable. We haven't seen a big gain or a big loss. And so I guess that's the good news. That's the silver lining, is at least those numbers are pretty steady.
Yeah, for sure. What are you hearing from business owners? Is red tape about the same or has it worsened or improved?
Who doesn't love red tape, right? I mean, that's always the fun part.
Yeah.
The province recently announced that it's cut red tape at the provincial level by about one third over the last 4 years. So they've really been focused on eliminating duplicate processes, eliminating rules that don't provide sort of that meaningful protections. The government really wants to speed up the time it takes to approve projects. In the city, I mean, municipalities have been working on that as well. It's been a mandate from the province that municipalities look to improve permit times, for example, and make that process simpler. The challenge, of course, is that red tape exists for a reason, usually. Public safety considerations, building code. So although it's important to eliminate red tape that's unnecessary, we also want to make sure that people are protected and that companies are following the right processes. And so an example that's coming up in Lethbridge, the city's just about to embark on a rewrite of the land use bylaw. That bylaw determines where stuff gets built, what kinds of buildings can go up, where businesses can locate. So that's a great opportunity to make changes that might speed up development. And so this is the time when people want to have input and share with the city their thoughts on what that could look like, and influence those future changes to reduce that red tape.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so we're kind of right in the middle of the agricultural food belt. So, what kind of feedback are you getting from the agribusiness sector at this point?
Yeah, this, of course, is Canada's premier food corridor, and dryland crops, unfortunately, were pretty negatively impacted by the drought conditions. Many rural municipalities across Alberta, including our region, declared states of agricultural disaster. This was the second consecutive year of drought, and so there's a real concern right now going into what could be a third. The forecast is for a warmer winter with far less precipitation than usual. So I know this next statement won't win me any friends, but it would be best if we all pray for snow and lots of it to
Oh,
refill those reservoirs.
yeah. It's funny when I spoke to the guy from the Farmer's Almanac, he predicted something completely opposite. He said lots of snow and lots of cold. So we'll
Well,
see. Maybe we'll meet somewhere in the middle there, Trevor.
I guess we'll see what happens, right?
Exactly. Now, have you heard how the surrounding southern Alberta communities are doing? Are they doing any better or worse than Lethbridge is?
Yeah, I mean, most of the measures that we track are for the census metropolitan area, which is a fancy way of saying the city itself, the surrounding Lethbridge County, as well as the small communities like Coaldale and Colehurst that are part of the county. So when we report our measures, we are looking at the region. I mean, the good news is commodity prices are up. So growers with irrigated acres have actually done okay. They've had increased revenues to offset their costs. Cattle prices are also up. So a lot of our beef producers have been able to realize some growth. And we have big projects like the expansion of McCain. That's a $600 million project to double the size of their facility in Lethbridge County. And of course, local construction companies benefit from that. And in the future, as they add, 8 to 12,000 acres of potatoes, that's good news for local growers as well. And it's actually the biggest project in McCain's history. So very
Wow.
excited to see that in our region.
Oh, yeah, that's fantastic news. So, speaking along the same vein there with agriculture, what kind of economic results are we seeing from the Lethbridge and District exhibition expansion so far, their new agri-food hub?
Yeah, the new Agri-Food Hub and Trade Center opened with a real bang in August. They had more than 100,000 people go through the building in the first 4 weeks of it being open. That was driven, of course, by record-setting attendance of Whoop Up Days. So that's very exciting, and I think underscores just how important this project is and just how big an impact it can have on the city and region. The Lethbridge and District Exhibition, that's the organization that operates the Agri-Food Hub, has estimated in their studies that the annual economic impact of the facility and all of the things that they do is about $90 million a year to the community. So we finally have a world-class venue to host the world and showcase everything that we do, right? We can attract national and international events. We can grow Ag Expo, for example. That's a huge event and has always been a big event in our
Yeah.
region, but it's been maxed out. You literally couldn't fit any more humans into that previous space. And so now
No.
we've got some great huge trade halls with power and internet and rigging capacity that's not found anywhere else. So I think it's really exciting to see what the possibilities are that are created by the new agri-food hub and
Oh,
trade center.
definitely. It'll be fantastic for tourism. And speaking of tourism, here's a big one. Flair Airlines. At first, they were coming to Lethbridge Regional Airport. Then it was paused. Then it was on pause. Now paused again. A lot of issues there. But are there any updates on Flair Air potentially coming to Lethbridge?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's not a great news story. Flair did announce at the beginning of September, just last month, that the planned route to Tucson would not be starting this fall. So, as you
Right.
pointed out, the seasonal service was originally supposed to start in December of last year. That was postponed due to some technical and supply chain reasons. And unfortunately, it will not be starting this year either. Flair, like most airlines, has really struggled with financing and operations at this time. And even dominant players like both Air Canada and WestJet have really been consolidating routes and making big changes to their networks over the last 6 months. So, the city is continuing to plan for future investment in the airport. Regional airports can have huge impact in driving tourism and economic development. So, the city's focus, I think, is to make sure YQL is ready for Flair or any other low cost carrier that wants to come in the future. But no news in the short term, unfortunately.
Yeah, I thought that I think part of the issue too was runway issues. It doesn't have the capacity to hold the 737 and other issues. So that means more airport expansion. So speaking of expansion, how's the construction industry going? Is it still continuing strong, Trevor?
Yeah, the construction industry has really been feeling the impact of increased costs. Inflation on building materials, for example, combined with also higher interest rates, has made it very challenging. When we look at housing starts, for example, inside the Lethbridge census metropolitan area, housing starts are down 82% when we look at June of this year compared to last year. So last year, mid-year, we had about 429 housing starts, which was a great number. So far this year, we only have 79. So that's a bit of a concern. Building permit values, and we look at building permit values because they're a forecast of projects to come. Building permit values are down almost 20% compared to last year. And even commercial real estate, so that's both lease and sales of commercial properties, down 32%. So, I don't think we're going to see a major change or improvement for the remainder of the year. It's going to continue to be challenging in the construction sector. The only bright spot, and it's a bit counterintuitive, notwithstanding everything I just said, employment in construction is actually up. So the construction sector added 800 jobs just last month, even though there's less projects. So we don't quite know what's going on there, but employment is strong. The prospects, unfortunately, in the short term are not that great.
Right. Okay. So you mentioned housing projects and real estate not doing great then. I was going to ask you if we're seeing any changes in the real estate market with especially now those interest rates are rising like crazy.
Yeah, I think people are definitely thinking twice. The good news is that prices have been relatively stable in our market. So if you're selling, you're not in a loss position. If you're buying, you're not dealing with crazy inflation. And we still have one of the most affordable markets in Canada. We still see investment people coming from places like Ontario, Vancouver, where they're selling properties for north of $1 million, and they
Oh
come
my
here and the
gosh.
same property is only $300,000 or $400,000. So
Yeah.
still a good place to invest, still a good place to move to. If you're from one of those markets, we will happily welcome you to choose Lethbridge. But yeah, certainly some challenges ahead for the housing market.
Yeah. Add to the growth in the province that we're seeing there. Okay. So we
Exactly.
talked about construction. What about the manufacturing sector? How are things shaping up there?
Yeah, manufacturing has actually been a bright spot for us as well. So, employment, for example, over the last year grew by some 1,300 positions. So, that's very exciting. We saw large growth in terms of the number of jobs in manufacturing.
Okay.
Local manufacturers, of course, have a really big impact when you look at their suppliers and their vendors. You think about their supply chain, all of that ripples through the economy. So, always good to see strong performance in manufacturing. And one of the measures we look at is exports. And unfortunately, it's only an annual number. But in 2022, exports from Lethbridge were just over $2.1 billion. And that's doubled from 5 years ago. So we've seen very strong growth. And I don't think, most people that live here don't realize that we have everything from commercial, aluminum doors and windows that are manufactured here to actually pre-manufactured homes, even to helicopter engines, as well as our food business. So many great things come out of the Lethbridge manufacturing sector.
That is very, very cool. So, Trevor, what are your thoughts on where Lethbridge, the economy in Lethbridge is headed over, say, the next 6 months?
Yeah, at the end of the day, I remain cautiously optimistic. The fundamentals of the Lethbridge economy are strong. We have a pretty diversified economy. We have, some of the lowest housing costs. We remain an attractive market for people looking to choose Alberta from other parts of the country and other parts of the world. We have a pretty diversified manufacturing base that's doing well, and we have strong public sector institutions like the college and the university that help provide stability to our economy as well. And frankly, some of the biggest risks as we look forward are things we don't have a lot of control over. So things like the weather and how that sets us up for next season in the fields, or some of the geopolitical events like the continued devastation in Ukraine and the broadening crisis in the Middle East. Those will have an impact, and then we just have to manage accordingly.
All right. Thanks so much, Trevor. Looks like we're about out of time, but we appreciate you, as always, being here today with us.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Trevor Lewington is the CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.